Hi, I'm Barry Sahajian, and this is my book, Essential Bass Theory Basics. I'm going to be using this book a lot in the upcoming tutorials I'm going to produce, and I'd like to do a review of it so you get an idea of what's going on with this book, as well as pick up a few tips along the way. I'll explain some of the theoretical things on these pages, but not to get in depth at this time. So let's get started with this, and this will be the second page. For the hell of it, I put in a circle of fifths image, and we go right into it. This is the index. Let me explain what's going on. So first of all, I explain root and fifth bass lines, adding rhythms, counting, and examples to make a root and fifth bass line more exciting and interesting, because as simple as a root and fifth bass line is, there's quite a few things you can do with it. Here's the root and fifth, and briefly I'll tell you what happened here. The root going down to the fifth, the root going up to the fifth, and two-bar phrases going down first and up, and then down, 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 and up, and then up, 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 and down. And believe it or not, that makes a little bit of a difference. Let me show you real quick the sound it can make. Listen to this. This is the first one. Second one. Now let's add them together, and don't sound like much, but just enough to change your line so it keeps people interested in listening. And the final one is going down 3 times and then up on the 4th time. And then turn it around. Go up and then down. And that's just a basic way. But, you know, someone that's just starting out may not know something that simple that can make that much of a difference. And I go into a little about counting rhythm right here, 8th notes, and then there's some practice rhythms right here. And this will really start you going. And I just do it with the root, because you want to get a hang of the rhythm, and then you can add the fifth, and it gets a little more interesting when you add root and fifth. But a lot of bass lines are simply one note, and and most of the time these one note rhythms are just straight eighths, which is effective, but it's on the lowest level of interest, I think. So here's where I start to get into syncopated root and fifth lines. And this is where it starts to sound like R&B and other types of things you've heard. And it's a little bit of a challenge because you have to count. You have to have these rhythms nice and tight and try to make them sound musical. So let's go on. And this is where it really starts, to me, is the meat and potatoes, the workbook type section of my book. So what I'm doing here is I'm using 3 shapes for all the arpeggios: major triad, minor 7th, dominant 7th, and major 7th. I cover all of those chords. And of course, the last 3 chords are 4 notes. The arpeggio gets a little more interesting, and there's a lot more things you can do. But the triad is not that limited as you think once you get into it. So as you see, I'm going to show you a little about this. So we take the major triad, and in the key of C. I'm sure you've heard that one. If you haven't, here it is. And then the next shape would be going to the 8th fret and playing it from the baby finger on the root. And then the third one would be putting a stretch. You're going out of position. It's now, what do you use that for? I'll tell you what you use that for. You use it to cross the neck, to extend the triad up an octave, and a lot of other things. Because this first position, you're kind of locked in. The only way you can move is to move your whole hand, But if you use combinations of that and the third shape, for instance, and I just went across the neck 2 octaves, and it was smooth, and it works, of course, if you're playing a major chord and you play a major triad. It's absolutely, it will absolutely work perfectly, of course. And moving it around in that bigger shape, it makes it sound bigger than it really is. And that's the beauty of it. And not to mention solo work. You can do some great stuff with it, you know. Anyway, that's further ahead. Just wanted to give you a little illustration. And right here, I have examples that show you how to use them with syncopated rhythms, and that makes it easier to get you started. You can, and not only that, you have to use counting to make it work. Now we go on to the minor triad, which is the same deal. You have 3 shapes, and in this one, I'm using an A minor. And so the first shape would be from the baby finger, 5th fret on the E string. And then the next shape would be playing from the 5th fret, but this time you're going to start with your middle finger and stretch a bit, going up to the 7th fret for your 5th. And the third shape will be starting with your index and playing it this way. So what happens is, now that you have these 3 shapes, it's easier for you to extend up the neck and come up with some different lines. Just simply because your shape is different, it enables you to play something different because the shape accommodates certain lines a little better than others simply because of the shape. So anyway, let's move on to the next one. And once again, you have all these examples you can try that are already written out for you, or you can just look at those shapes and try to memorize a shape and move around and find your own lines. And so it really is a creative way to come up with your lines, just by knowing the shape and knowing your neck a little better. So now we go into the dominant 7th chord. And this has 4 notes in the arpeggio, and this is on a G7th. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. So the first shape is just basically in position from the 2nd position. And the 2nd shape, you put in a stretch there, going from and the 3rd shape would be from the 10th fret on the A string Next we go into the A minor shape, and this one starts on the 5th fret naturally and goes like this. The 1, flat 3, 5, and the flat 7 nicely in position. So the next one would be starting on the A on the 12th fret. So 12th fret, 10th fret for the minor 3rd, 9th fret for the 5th, 12th fret for the flat 7. And then we have this one once again with a stretch in there. 12th fret A, 10th fret C, or flat 3, and then 14th fret on the E, and then 12th fret on the flat 7. So if you start fooling around with this stuff, you can come up with a lot of great lines. And once again, we have 1, 2, I guess we got 12 lines here you can work with. So we're playing a G major 7th here. The first shape is in position, second position. The second shape includes that stretch. Instead of playing the third here, you play it here. And right away, because this shape accommodates, you can play a 9, or you can pivot up the neck a lot easier. Okay, now what do we got next? Next, we're into the Tetrachord Theory, which opens up understanding to how keys work and how sharps and flats work, the circle of fourths and the circle of fifths, and all of that is coming up. And it's based on a tetrachord, which is 2 4-note scales going up whole step, half step, and then there's a whole step in between, whole step, half step again. Put them on top of each other, and you have a major scale. And called the lower tetrachord and the upper tetrachord. I mean, there's not a whole lot of thought given to this. Once you learn it, you just understand how the sharps and flats are added to each new key going in the circle of fourths, the fifths. And this would be... So this previous one was in the key of C, no sharps or flats. As soon as you stop moving to a new key, in this case we go up a fourth, to F, which is the first flat key, has a B flat, and once again the lower tetrachord and the upper tetrachord. The tetrachord kind of guides you into how the sharps and flats are added, and sharps are in a series of fifths, flats are in a series of fourths. And that's basically it, and I go into it much deeper, and this is another way to view your sharps and flats. Instead of using the traditional circle of fourths and fifths, use kind of a graph, and that gives you another perspective on how to understand this. And let me see here. So now we're going into the key of G, which is the first sharp key. Once again, the lower tetrachord, the upper tetrachord. And you'll notice that we have an F sharp on the 7th degree. Now the thing is when you go to the next sharp key, which is D, the 7th degree would have a C sharp. So now you have 2 sharps, F sharp and C sharp, and so forth. Each key you go up a fifth, a new sharp is added on the 7th degree of the scale, and it all starts to make sense when you use it a bit. Now that you've checked this out, you look at a piece of music and you see 2 flats. What key are you in? And this explains how do you determine what key you're in simply by looking at the number of sharps or flats. And I won't go into that too deeply now, but basically the next to the last flat would be the key you're in. For instance, on this one flat is B flat. And you have to know that you're in the key of F, because there's not the next to the last, there's just one flat. So you go into the next key, which has 2 flats, B flat and E flat. That means the next to the last flat would be a B flat. So you're in the key of B flat, and so forth. That's the way it works. And then quickly we'll go into how you determine what key you're in by numbers of sharps. So you have an F sharp, and that will be in the key of G. And in this case, it's a little bit easier than the flats, because the flats was the next to the last flat, and you have to know B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, C flat. You have to know that, which should be memorized and known by heart. And on the sharp keys, you simply go up a half step from the last sharp added. In this case, we have 1 sharp. That will be add a half step to it, that's G. You're in the key of G. And then the next one I put 3 sharps. And so you have F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. So raise the G sharp, which is the last sharp, and you get an A. You're in the key of A. And that's basically how it works. I mean, you use that formula initially until you start to understand it, but sooner or later you'll get to know 3 sharps is key of A, 4 sharps is key of E. When you get up to 6 sharps and 5 sharps, maybe you have to think a little bit, but at least you have a formula where you can figure it out. So this is, now we go into touching on harmony a little bit. So you have a major scale, and you know, basically, very basically, if you choose every other note, you wind up with a chord. And each chord has an interval between it. And that's the way that works. And when you see it on music, it's spaces or lines or ledger lines, every other ledger line or every other space, and that would give you your chord, basically, once again. So here are the chords built on every degree of the scale. And on these chords, you have numbers for each degree of the scale and a chord. So the 1 chord, which would be a Roman numeral, would be a major chord. And then the D chord, which would be a 2, would be a minor chord. And the 3 would be an E minor, then a F major, and then a G major. And that also includes the 7th when we go up there in a minute. And then the 6th chord would also be a minor chord. The 7th chord is the special chord, a diminished chord. And we'll go into that too, but right now let's just move on. And I do the same thing, 7th chords right here. And you can see Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And, you know, it's just the same thing as the triads, except you add a 7th on it. And the only chords that have a major 7 would be the 1 chord. There would be a C, and if you're going to put a 7th on it, it would be a major 7th. And the F would be also a major 7th. So you have C major 7th, F major 7th. And the rest are minor 7ths, with the exception of the last 2 chords I'd like to explain briefly are the 5 and the 7. Chords built on the 5th degree and the 7th degree of the major scale. They both share a common interest. They have a tritone, which is an interval of 2 notes, a flat 5 apart. And that would be, for instance, from B in the key of C to F. They are a flat 5 apart. And it gives you this dissonant sound, an unstable sound of a chord that wants to resolve. Without the tritone in these 7th chords, you would not have blues progression. That's all they're about. Blues progression is all 7th chords, as you know, for the most part. So that briefly explains all the chords built on a major scale up to the 7th. At this time, I'd like to continue on and briefly explain to you about progressions and show you a few of them. Now we're going into chord progressions here and the blues progression, and I have some lines here to play on the blues, and then we have sort of a rock blues progression over here. And then we have a 1-4 progression, major 7ths. And then the famous jazz progression, 50s and 60s popular tunes, 1, 6, 2, 5. Once again, Roman numeral 1 for C major 7th, Roman numeral number 6 for A minor 7th, and Roman numeral number 2 for a D minor 7th, 2 minor 7. And then you have your dominant 7th chord, 5-7 chord, and that's some of the terminology you will be encountering when you play this. So this is just, like I said, a review of what's going on in this book, and maybe you picked up a couple of ideas from just me talking about this. I hope you did. And the book is for sale. I have it for sale as a digital book, which is a little cheaper than the physical book. And a lot of people prefer the physical book still. I like it myself better. But if you don't want to spend the money on the book, just go through the lessons I'm going to teach you, and I'm going to give you the pages as we go on. If you like this video, please subscribe, hit the button to be notified of all the new lessons to come, like and comment. Thank you for stopping by. Hope to see you again on the next lessons up the road.